I hope this is worth it.
Definitely.
Okay. So in 1972, Henry Dreyfuss published his Symbol Sourcebook, described at the time by Library Journal as a ready reference aid and an inspiration to designers. All in all, the best book now available on symbols. It formed a complex undertaking, both in terms of organisation, funding and design. The final production of the book by a small but committed team had taken under 2 years to complete, but it is, as Dreyfuss himself stated, the result of a lifetime spent working with symbols, which he produced when he stepped away from his company to devote himself entirely to the Symbol project. Next slide, please. Correspondence in the archive clearly demonstrates Dreyfuss' passion for symbols, both to promote functionality in his product design, but also as a means of transcending the language barrier, a recurrent theme during the mid-1960s to the early 70s. This period is known as the Jet and Communications Age, known for the growth of internationalism in the West, driven by increased wealth post-World War II, leading to the greater affordability of international flight. Airports needed to cope with passengers who could not understand signage in languages different to their own. In 1969, the first man landed on the moon. So why was it so difficult to find ways to break the language barrier? Symbols were also considered as a way forward to promote international peace in the wake of the nuclear threat. And in response to these worrying times, organizations like UNESCO were promoting projects about peace and internationalism, and the United Nations celebrated their 20th anniversary by naming 1965 as International Cooperation Year. Margaret Mead put forward a suggested United States proposal on glyphs, universal graphic symbols, to the United Nations Committee on the International Cooperation Year. Next slide, please. Using 4 articles from the late 1960s, this presentation will attempt to describe some of the forces at work as Henry Dreyfuss designed the book and show why symbols formed a major preoccupation in design and social sciences. Next slide, please. Along the way, it will introduce the key players in the symbol arena who are trying to recreate universal symbols. It will also show how Dreyfuss cut through the idealist ideas which were being circulated by symbol commentators to navigate a successful pathway through the most impossible challenge to create a cross-referenced classification system, the symbol Holy Grail, which would attempt to break the language barrier. Next slide, please. And the next one. Okay. If you're not familiar with the book, and you probably are by now, here are a few spreads to show the anatomy of the book, various aspects as to how it was designed. Can you run through quickly the next few slides, please, Martin? We have basic symbols, which we've already seen. One of the disciplines, safety. Graphic form, a difficult one. And colour and graphic form. The colour section, which Faber Biren, I think, helped with. And the disciplines section showing who worked on what. Okay, thank you. You can stop now. This is a rather lovely sketch that I found in Russell's book, which shows how Dreyfuss worked with characters from a company all around the table. And I thought it was a good analogy as to how the Symbol Sourcebook was designed. And showing how he worked with clients. Note how he depicted himself with 2 heads. He listened, he did his research, he understood how the end product was used, and he viewed the problem from every angle. The design process involved assembling the right people around his not always fictitious table would allow him to understand how to solve the design problem. Much of this was done through correspondence. Around the table are idealists, eccentrics, anthropologists, pragmatists, the old school symbol fraternity, contemporary designers, social scientists, society figures, advertising chiefs, publishers, humanitarian organizations and funding bodies, old clients, new contracts, and hundreds of subject experts and academics. Next slide, please. Thousands of symbol questionnaires were sent out to elicit new symbols. Table guests changed as the symbol project moved through its phases of development, from a vague notion in 1960 to the printed book in January 1971. There is an extensive amount of correspondence in the archive from symbol commentators such as Margaret Mead, anthropologist, symbol consultant Rudolph Modley, co-chairs of Glyphs Inc., designer Soichi Kato and his organization, the International Committee to Break the Language Barrier, scientist Martin Krampen, the only person undertaking serious design research into symbols at the time. In the UK, Peter Kneebone, Billy de Mayo and FSHK Henry Navakagrada's Commission on Signs and Symbols, and Masaru Katsumi in Japan, director of the Tokyo Olympics graphics and editor of Graphic Design magazine. Other characters around the table include Dreyfuss' compact design administrative team, representatives from humanitarian organizations who were sponsoring projects at the time, such as Alvin C. Urich of the Fund for the Advancement of Education, UNESCO, Kellogg Foundation, Mildred Constantine of the Museum of Modern Art, publisher McGraw-Hill, and Leo Burnett of the advertising agency, Leo Burnett, who at one point were considering taking over the job and producing the Symbol Sourcebook in their Chicago office. It's a poignant letter from Burnett to Dreyfuss in 1970, where Burnett stated that the Symbol project needed Dreyfuss as its guiding spirit. And this shows the respect with which Dreyfuss was held by his contemporaries. Correspondence paints a picture of a man with a quick and keen intellect, a great sense of humour, a loyal friend and a considerate person to work for. However, he didn't suffer fools gladly, and some of his memos show that. You have the next slide, please. Archival correspondence reveals many levels of symbol collection and research. To get a better understanding of the best examples of symbols available to represent each discipline, project manager Paul Clifton and his team left no stone unturned in their quest to do this. These are this and the next slide, if you'd like to flick to it, are examples of articles, booklets written by Dreyfuss, Clifton and Purcell from 1968 to 1970. So the key articles I'll be reviewing are, and next slide, please. Communication, bless you, among all people everywhere, from Natural History magazine, August 1968. Next one, a new sign language, Breaking the Language Barrier, newspaper article by Soichi Kato. Next one, a new sign language by George A. Bohm from Think magazine. And finally, Print magazine. Next slide, please. 1969, special edition on signs and symbols. These articles reveal the spirit of the time seen through Dreyfuss' eyes in the correspondence in the Symbol Sourcebook archive, reveal key design commentators and organizations involved with communication through symbols during the 1960s and early 1970s. So next slide, please. Going back to this article. And the next slide, please. Okay, sorry, can you go back? Can you go back to the back one, please? Yes, okay. In 1965, anthropologist Margaret Mead, and head of architecture at the Museum of Natural History in New York, put forward a proposal to the UN for a program to engage international government bodies to create and deliver a set of universal symbols known as glyphs, which everyone in the world could understand. Can we have the next slide, please? The first requirement then for our technologically developed world is a set of clear, unambiguous signs that can be understood by the speakers of any language and by members of any culture, however primitive. Next slide, please. In 1968, Communication Among All People Everywhere was published. It beautifully illustrates the utopianism of the time and the belief that universal language was a possibility. Anyone on the planet can travel to any part of it in 36 hours, but people speak 2,800 languages and it's impossible to provide interpreters. It proposes that the world is provided with a small set of glyphs or symbols, out of which a worldwide set of unambiguous and instant non-linguistic signs could emerge. They will learn them from either school or governmental or international intervention. The article itself sets out perfectly the stall for glyphs and mentions those active in this search for universal communication through symbols at the time. For instance, Charles K. Bliss, whose symbols are not unlike the ones Glyph Inc. were proposing, which you can see above here, and Bliss below. It also mentions Cato's International Committee for Breaking the Language Barrier, International Air Transport Association, Commission on International Signs and Symbols, UNESCO, ISO, and the International Chamber of Commerce. So glyphs don't require knowledge of a language. It is unambiguous, simple, and understandable to anyone who's learned it. Glyphs create a direct and immediate impact and permit an immediate response, which saves thinking and allows the brain to concentrate on more advanced problems. The article describes types of symbols, image-related, concept-related, arbitrary, and goes on to bemoan the fact that sets of proposed glyphs are popping up everywhere. The result has been much experimentation, some progress, and a great deal of confusion can cause chaos. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So this slide shows the interest in symbol projects going back as far as 1940, attempting to create symbol dictionaries. Rudolf Modely's name is prominent in many of these entries. So next slide, please. In 1960, I'm sorry about this one, Modely contacted Henry Dreyfuss. Modely had assisted Otto Neurath in Vienna at the Gesells- und Wirtschaftsmuseum, brought his own version of isotype to America during the 30s and 40s. Since the 1950s, Modely had been more interested in identifying universal symbols. In 1958, he worked with Mary Neurath and Martin Krampen with Henry Dreyfuss on a proposal to investigate the feasibility of producing a symbol dictionary, initially funded by the Fund for Advancements of Education. The project failed to achieve secondary funding, but Modely never lost his appetite for symbol projects. Next slide, please. In 1966, Margaret Mead and Rudolf Modely formed Glyphs Inc. They were eager to work with Dreyfuss to help with the classification methods, and even wanted to take over the project in early days. You can see this little bit here in the middle of the slide. He said glyphs would be glad to cooperate and even be taken over by another organization, or he said, glyphs being already established, perhaps it should take over the organization. I made no comment. And this is one of the first comments that shows what Henry Dreyfuss was having to deal with as he navigated his process through making this book. Memos show that Dreyfuss was wary of Modely, even though he had close dealings with him. And the elderly Mead was often also difficult to deal with, as she expressed her ideas very forcefully and was sometimes unaccommodating. In particular, Glyphs Inc. wanted to take over the classification symbol project. Again, Dreyfuss not keen. Modley also went on very useful international fact-finding missions to help with the book, not just for Dreyfuss. Can I have the next slide, please? And he visited the old school of symbol experts, such as Mary Neurath, London, Bliss, Koberstein, Schinkel, Kneebone, Stankowski, Katsumi, and Christensen. He recommended that only the work of Neurath and Bliss, who Modley described as idealists, were important enough to be mentioned in the book. Next slide, please. As only symbols in contemporary use would be included in the book, which made life a lot easier, I think, to navigate that. Next slide, please. Modley and Mead produced Glyphs Inc. newsletters sporadically from 1966, this is the first one, until Modley's death in 1976. Next slide, please. And the next slide. Okay. Soichi Kato of the International Committee for Breaking the Language Barrier. Kato was a Japanese-born New Yorker who based his work on his own problems navigating around New York when he got there. He wanted to use pictograms to find the right way to navigate the city. His project was to find the right symbols for things like public signing, like the police, toilets, first aid, stop, start, pull, push. He believed that by 1970, we will all be able to travel in any city in the world and find our way around with the help of universally familiar pictures rather than a dictionary. Don't think he'd heard of Google at that point. Dreyfuss corresponded with Kato, and he also made himself very much part of the international symbol community during the 1960s. He formed links with Ikagrada in the UK and Katsumi in Japan, and was helpful in correspondence to Dreyfuss, but not well thought of by Mead, Ikagrada, or the symbol community. Next slide, as this next slide shows. The bit at the bottom here, sorry, can you go back? We talked at some length about Kato. He said he is a complete phony, great publicity hound, really accomplishing nothing. I said, where does he make his money and how does he live? And he said he's looked into it. This is Modley talking, by the way, and thinks he has something to do with buying or selling helium. He said he understands the UN wishes they had nothing to do with him and hadn't ever started. I said, why don't you give him a job and control him? He said he had suggested that, but Mead is against him, feels he is a psychological case. And this letter next to it, with Dreyfuss annotations, sorry, it says nothing he hasn't said before. So he hasn't got anything new to say really to do with symbols for Dreyfuss. But he's a character that does come up quite often in symbol language around about this time. Next slide. A New Sign Language, Straight Ahead by George A.W. Bohm, Think magazine, 1968. This is written in close cooperation with Dreyfuss and really does set out Dreyfuss' hopes and dreams for the symbol dictionary. Bear in mind, this is 1968. It was called a symbol dictionary at that point. It changed name, as I showed earlier. And it's practical in its considerations of how Dreyfuss would solve the problem of getting the Symbol project together. I'll read a few quotes from it. Many a tourist has found himself losing something in translation. The problem is more serious for international airlines, highway officials, industries getting heavily involved in export-import. Universal Sign Language, many authorities believe, could go a long way towards coping with the Babel of our society. Babel, Tower of Babel, often mentioned at this point. A worldwide crisis in comprehension bedevils public safety officials, managers of international airports, manufacturers of machinery, cartoonists, designers of posters, and others who want to make themselves instantly intelligible. They need a common language, one that will function as smoothly in everyday life as Church Latin, diplomatic French, Morse code, and mathematical notation among specialists. And with jet travel, no corner of the world is more than a couple of days away. There's lots of things here that resonate and are slightly changed from the Mead and Maudley article. Any two people can exchange messages electronically within minutes, and the world thrusts itself upon all people, even those who seldom venture out of their neighbourhoods. Booming international trade is putting unfamiliar projects with unscrutable labels into millions of homes. International television will soon fill the air with new ideas voiced in strange tongues. Again, Bohm is picking up on the natural history article. And he promotes Dreyfuss' dictionary of all signs and symbols in common use throughout the world, and talks about how he's going to explore it and how they're going to work and why. He says, aided by a skeleton staff in his Pasadena office, he has completed a preliminary study supported by a modest grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. The whole project will probably cost around $1 million and will preempt a great deal of Dreyfuss' time for several years. He wants to enlist a staff of advisors from every part of the globe who will not only collect symbols in use, but also judge which of them can be safely transported from one culture to another. And he says that Dreyfuss is currently busy rounding up finance for the project. Several publishers are interested, and he expects worldwide sales of the dictionary will be so great over a period of years to make it a self-liquidating venture. So the publication of the dictionary will provide a great impetus for setting standards for symbols in fields where chaos now reigns, and whole sections of the Dreyfuss Dictionary will provide standards for many fields in the US, and perhaps internationally. And that would be a running start towards a universal sign language. Next slide, please. Icagrada. This November-December 1969 special issue of print magazine on international signs and symbols pays homage to the efforts of Icagrada, edited by Chairman FHK Henryan of the Icagrada Commission on Signs and Symbols. In 1966, in response to the confusion formed by expansion of projects on public travel and information design systems, they had an impressive international body of design professionals working with them, which included Martin Krampen, Katsumi, Maudley, and Paul Rand, along with others. They staged congresses and launched student competitions to try to create a unified set of universally understood signs. This magazine from 1969 adds the European perspective on an American magazine and how to break the language barrier. Cato was the US representative of the Commission on Signs and Symbols before Maudley took over. The Icagrada were very envious of Dreyfuss as being the one who achieved funding to publish the Symbol Sourcebook, as this memo shows. Next slide, please. This is a strange draft. I don't think it was ever actually sent on many levels, really. It illustrates the intrigue and complex web in which Dreyfuss was working at the time. Acagrada were trying to foster connections with Dreyfuss, but sadly their efforts received, although noble, received little in the way of funding, and they relied upon the research abilities of Martin Crampen, who did the production method, which is shown in the last slide with the little drawings, to try to come up with signs that people could all understand. They themselves, Acagrada, had little experience of how to conduct research and find the best way forward for symbols, which were universally understood. Can we zip through the slides, please? Yeah, this is correspondence from Dreyfuss to Acagrada and from Acagrada to Dreyfuss. And yeah, I think we can move on. Conclusion. Dreyfuss and his team successfully achieved his aim of producing a book which fulfilled the challenge to, or at least challenge the language barrier and promote symbols as a primary language for communication. The book was a great success. The second edition was published in July 1972, and a paperback edition followed in 1984, still in print today. It formed the culmination of a life working with symbols. Dreyfuss cleverly navigated his way through the utopianism, idealism, and competitiveness of symbol organizations, and would be authors of other symbol dictionaries. Dreyfuss managed to publish the book due to his integrity, tenacity, and pragmatism as a designer, his incredible network of clients, his professionalism, warmth, and goodwill with which he was regarded. The fact that Dreyfuss and Marx understood the machinations of business, knew how to apply for and succeed in getting funding, I feel is the reason he succeeded in getting this book published. Acagrada glyphs and the International Council for Breaking the Language Barrier were not hugely successful in achieving funding, and plans put forward into how they would conduct research into symbols was vague. If we say that Acagrada and glyphs form the transition between the old school of Bliss and isotype, Dreyfuss takes us forward into the brave new world of the 1970s, when some standardization was taken seriously, as can be seen in the many signs from the Symbol Sourcebook, which are still current today. The utopia of a truly universal language could never become a reality unless it was, as Glyph said, taken up by international governments. But we have ISO standards. But on the other hand, we also have organizations and individuals designing their own emoji sets. So the Tower of Babel becomes more full of symbols by the minute. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. And this also fits with the chimp and Doris Marx. Thank you very much.